On this week's NFV SDN Reality Check, we're talking with Ken Delbeck, who's the head of collaboration program at the TM Forum, on moving NFV and SDN from hype to reality.
Telecom Careers, the #1 global telecom and wireless job board, telecomcareers.com. CommScope, thinking beyond today's technology to help you make the best decision for your network and your business.
Hi, and thanks for joining us on this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief of RCR Wireless News. Today, I'm joined by Ken Delbeck, who's the head of collaboration program at TM Forum, to talk a bit about the evolution of NFV and SDN and virtualization in general from the hype cycle to reality. Hey, Ken, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Great. Well, I guess let's talk, just jump into the subject here. I mean, obviously, this kind of topic came to my mind recently because I was at the TM Forum event in Nice, France, and you had hosted a whole day actually kind of looking at kind of this move from NFV and virtualization really from the hype cycle that was kind of, been over NFV and SDN for a while now to reality, which is obviously where everybody wants to go with this. And I guess I was hoping to get from you some insight on that topic there. So maybe, as you look at this, what are maybe some of the bigger challenges that you see in kind of this move for NFV and SDN and virtualization from what's been this hype to eventually the reality of kind of virtualization?
Well, one of the things that we've definitely seen here at the forum is the challenge in the culture and within the operators themselves of how are they going to be able to accommodate the shift from procuring boxes and procuring hardware in the way that they have their procurement organization set up now, and to being into the mode of procuring software. The mode and the whole thought process and the culture and even the dollars that will be extended are completely different. And we've been doing a lot of work with our members and their procurement organizations around how do we do that. We've created a survival guide that we've just recently published on how we see some of those procurement changes taking place. We believe that's symptomatic of the fundamental culture shift that needs to occur within an operator. You're going to see that culture change within the procurement organizations. You're going to see the same types of changes occurring within their operations organizations. They're going to have to shift from a very hardware-centric diagnostic technique to a very software-centric technique. You're going to see things like DevOps become the mode of operation, and that is just not the way the organizations are put together. It's not the culture, and it's not their thoughts at this point.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I know I've talked to a lot of operators about kind of their moves here, and I think some of the more vocal ones, like AT&T, for instance, here in the U.S., talking to them, I mean, they've even said that this isn't just like you said, like a technology change. It's a cultural change for these organizations. I mean, these are companies that have legacy systems, have legacy way of doing things that they've done for AT&T for 100 years now. I mean, they've been doing things for a long time a certain way, and this is a big move, it seems like, for these operators that they're trying to roll out in a fairly short period of time, really.
Yes, I mean, you're going to have training issues. You're going to have union issues. You're going to have all of these will be factors in this. If it was just a technology change, if we were doing something simple like go from 3G to 4G, I say in jest.
Yes.
But that was a more manageable change in a lot of ways than what we're trying to do right now, as far as the impacts within the organization are. And I think, as you pointed out, AT&T, Orange, a few other service providers have embraced this and said, we have to do this in order to be able to compete and be able to move into this new digital service environment that's emerging, and their ability to be able to provide services very rapidly and be able to assemble services very, very, very quickly. I think some of the over-the-top guys are definitely coming in and introducing threat in this area that introduce the urgency for AT&T and Orange to be able to, they're saying we have to make this change. It's not going to be something that's voluntary. If we don't, the new guys will be there before we are, and the market will disappear on them.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up because it does seem like a lot of the operators have, like you said, embraced this notion because a lot of them realize this is what's happening. I mean, I've talked to some operators in Europe, and they seem to really understand that hey, these OTT guys, I mean, they're eating our lunch. I mean, they're taking everything that we should be doing, and just doing it quickly. They're getting out there, rolling out services, being very aggressive, and we're kind of sitting back and just letting them do this. I mean, it seems like some do obviously realize this, and I think again at that event in Nice, the TM Forum put on, you had a lot of speakers there, a lot of them from these OTT providers who have a whole different mindset. It seems like about how to tackle these situations that operators in the telecom space are definitely having to adjust to, and it's kind of interesting to see how that's all kind of playing out in the real world.
Yeah, well, I think in some ways they have the advantage of not having the heritage of
Sure.
having dealt with the equipment for so long and have all of the process, and they have all of the union, and they have all of the employees that know how to do business in a specific way. They have a group that have come out of a DevOps environment, and
Yeah.
they have a very software-centric focus, and they're used to running 10,000 servers with 10 guys versus, one guy for every 50 or one
Yeah.
guy for every 25.
Yeah.
It's just a completely different mindset. And that's going to be the real challenge is,
Yeah.
that we're competing, and the operators are going to be competing with a group they're not used to. So they've got to learn how to compete in that environment.
Yeah.
And, to be honest, the other guys are going to have to learn the upside on this too. It's not going to be a one-sided battle, but there's definitely going to be a real interesting challenge and interaction between those two groups.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're right, because those guys coming from the data center or the software world are coming to a whole new world because telecom is different than what they're used to. I mean, telecom, there are quality of service issues. There are the whole the 5 nines. There are all these different things that telecom seems to have embraced for its all existence. That these guys are coming into it differently too. So it does seem like you're right. There is kind of this two different angles coming into this. That obviously it'll meet somewhere in the middle, but yeah, even those new guys have to kind of adjust to what they're doing when it comes to working with telecom operators for what their specific needs are too.
Yeah, you just the number of termination points,
Yeah,
and the amount of geographic dispersion that are within a telecom network, people completely don't appreciate until you're in the industry and you understand that on every street corner and everywhere, you don't even they're so ubiquitous you don't even recognize all the pops that are out there.
yeah, that's a good point. You're right. And that's kind of an interesting point. I guess that's a good spot where kind of TM Forum, and I know I've talked to you guys in the past, that is kind of where your sweet spot seems to be, is to be able to kind of, I guess, bring those two worlds together. Because again, there is that understanding gap there that it seems like you guys are able to help bridge for a lot of these guys out there too. So it's a big part of what you guys seem to be doing out there.
Yeah, and it's actually we point out, because of the IT focus that the forum has had in the past, and the definite background of some of our members that are very much into the information IT arena,
Yeah.
we're able to bring both of those pieces of experience, and we try to bring them together. And a lot of what we're doing within our Zoom zero touch operations and orchestration operations and management program is around that, because it's saying that it is not just about virtualizing the network equipment. It's about how do I introduce all of these changes into the culture? How do I introduce the software focus into my operations group? We've got work that it's just been recently been published within the last 2 months, actually,
Mhm.
on what do we think the changes in the OSS environment are going to be? What do we think the impacts on how do you do management across this environment is going to change? Because it's the management of the network will not just change at the equipment level.
Yeah.
It's going to change across the spectrum, because it's going to become a basically a software continuum.
Yeah.
How do I manage a software continuum? How does orchestration change from the very top? How do I coordinate orchestration that's impacting at the service layer, but at the same time I have orchestration occurring down at the physical layer? How do those work together to guarantee my service level agreements, my quality of service? How do I collect the right information in order to monetize that service? All of those issues are things that the forum addresses, and we're where a lot of that thought leadership comes together.
Yeah, it's been very good to kind of see how that all has all played together too. Well, another kind of topic on this as well is, I wanted to touch a bit on obviously the hype when it comes to virtualization, and again, kind of the topic of this conversation was kind of, I guess digging through that hype and taking NFV from hype to reality. Has the hype surrounding NFV, has it to this point helped or hindered the development of the technology and how telecom operators have looked at? Because it does seem like the past 18 months has been a lot of hype. I mean, it's been, every show we've gone to, at least I've gone to, it's become more and more a part of the show. The conversation has been kind of this move towards virtualization. From your view, has this helped or is it hindered this move towards virtualization, do you think?
Is it fair to say both? Simply, on one side, I think you're right. It's hurt NFV in the fact that it has become a bit overblown, and it is it's the next great answer. But in the other side, I think it has brought the right focus to the problem that needs to be there for the industry, because as you mentioned, there are companies like AT&T and Orange and et cetera that have said we have to address this. Without the hype, they may not have. And to be honest, with what I see coming with IoT and 5G, and where those, their complete reliance on virtualization. If you the white paper that came out from NGNM and 5G, they lay virtualization as a fundamental building block. And I believe that IoT is going to push us into 5G faster than we think. It will be a faster transformation than what we've done in the past. The needs are going to be there. That's going to probably be one of the fastest technology transformations we've gone through, is because as these the business drivers are going to be there, the monetization is going to be there for the 5G transformation, and virtualization is going to be absolutely critical in order to get to those new monies and new services that are going to be emerging on the market. So, is the hype good? Is it bad? I think part of it is a detriment. People are expecting it to be in some ways more than what it is. But it is getting the focus. And, I think the one thing I would tell people is, if you're not started yet, get started immediately. Begin to learn, begin to bring your staff with you, begin to do the training, begin to make the shift to a software centric. A lot of the skills will transfer, but they need to start the journey immediately.
Again, it's not too late, obviously, to get into it, but you obviously have to start moving here pretty soon, though, to kind of make sure you stay up on this. But and it does seem like you're right. It's managing those expectations is probably where we're at now, it seems, when it comes to NFV. Because you're right. I mean, a year ago, I still talk to some people who seem to think virtualization is going to pretty much replace everything in the network, which maybe it could at some point, but there definitely has to be some sort of some more realistic expectations of what to have. I mean, obviously, you need to have some hardware still there in the network, and smart hardware too. But again, there's just that management of expectations is kind of the key for this right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And, even if you go into a virtual data center, there's still hardware. The difference is the variety. You have a lot more of the same stuff that is being multi-purpose. And I think that's where some of the fundamental change is going to be here. It's not just hardware go away. Absolutely, hardware has to be there. You will have to have switching fabric, and you will have to have CPUs, and you will have to have storage. It's just going to be the type and the fact that it's being multi-purposed,
Yeah.
and it's going to be distributed. And I think that's where the distribution of that is where what's going on in the network is going to be what's a bit different than what's happening in the major data centers. Those guys have major deployments all over the world, whether it be in San Antonio or whether it be in Othello, Washington. They've got big, massive data centers that and the network won't be that way. The network's going to be all over everywhere. It may be next door to your Safeway down the street, or it's going to be in a big center downtown. I don't know. That's the one major challenge that I think the network has to face as far as its virtualization, and the problems that it's going to face because of that are going to be different. Latencies are going to be different. The ability to do all your load shifting, even policy about where things can be, could come into play. It may be against the law for it to be on that side of the border, and if it's 6 blocks over and now it's in Germany, it can't go there.
That's a great point, right? Even the regulatory issues that come along with this, that's a whole different ballgame when it comes to especially telecom, because that is for a lot of countries, that's kind of a very important part of it to a country's operations. So you're right, that's going to be a huge part that a lot of people probably even skimming over the fact is you got a lot of countries and companies involved in this that are in different countries that are perhaps not on the best of terms with other countries, and so we've got that to deal with.
Way to put it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so you got those challenges. I mean, that alone that's a whole different show right there. We could do, but that's a big challenge.
Yeah, and that's absolutely where we've been focusing a great deal of our effort on something called policy, and that sounds really innocuous, but policy will dictate all of those issues. It will be how it's manifested. It's in software. There will be a policy statement that says this can't reside in country X. It has to be within these borders, and then how that's manifested all the way down to the operations level is part of the challenge that we're looking at. We've got a lot of very good work going on within the Zoom project on policy, and how does that manifest itself both within configuration as well as how does it manifest itself in security? How is it interpreted in orchestration? A number of our catalysts actually are demonstrating some of the early the beginning of how do you realize this. So we're not just looking at this from a theoretical, here's a great piece of white paper, but we're realizing this down into code and implementation, saying here it is, here's the beginnings of a solution, and that's pretty exciting considering where we're at with the industry. And we're definitely trying to make sure that what we're doing from thought leadership is also being realized in the actual product and in software.
Yeah, that's a great point. You're right. Those Catalyst programs that you guys run, I know this year's event in Nice, I mean, you guys had a lot of great Catalyst programs, and the best part I thought was the level of, or the diversity of companies involved in them. I mean, there were telecom operators from different regions of the world, equipment makers, software makers. I mean, I thought the people involved in each one of those catalysts was an interesting makeup. I think over the previous year, it seemed like there was a lot more diversity, or at least a lot more international view, I think, with the partners involved in these catalyst programs, which I thought was an interesting move. And obviously, it's part of the whole evolution of this, but that seemed like an interesting increase this year at the catalyst stage that you guys had there too.
Yeah, I think one of the things you're seeing, as you said, the hype around NFV and what's good and what's bad about it. One of the things that's good is it means all of the entrepreneurs now have to have an NFV product in order to sell in order to be able to sell their company.
Yeah.
So, you're seeing that uptick, and you saw a lot of smaller companies that are doing the innovation that are providing the niche solutions, but you also saw the big players, because there's a realization that this is a major change, and there will be major opportunity, and there's going to be a major upside to the entire NFV structure, or the NFV evolution. So it will get the attention of the IBMs, the Oracles, and the Microsofts. Those guys are going to go, there's enough money that even as big as we are, we should be interested. And so that, I think that's part of what's contributing to the diversity, is that everyone is seeing that there is opportunity, but because of all the challenges around policy, around orchestration, around how do I manage software distribution, how do I manage service and physical as a single continuum, you're going to see the smaller companies say, we can innovate in this area and we can provide value, and through that value that we can provide, there's opportunity. So there's opportunity across the board in this particular way, and the way it's rolling out. It's not going to be like a 4G rollout, where if you're not an established equipment provider, you're going to have, you're not going to create a new 4G piece of equipment and roll it out. Where we're at now, I was at GSMA 2 years ago. There was a guy with an Intel box and an access point that was giving you a wireless access point, for $15K, and you kind of went, this is crazy. It's just not the way that our industry works, but we changed the rule set. So I think there's some real interesting opportunities, and you're going to see new entrepreneurs, and you're going to see lots of people entering the market.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think the operators are encouraging that too. I know AT&T, for instance, with its domain program, they've announced a lot of companies that are somewhat new to the telecom space as part of these programs. And so it's like, you see these names for the first time, you're like, oh, who's this company? And now you're seeing more and more of these guys coming on board. It's like, wow, this is all of a sudden the equipment market is not just the Nokias, the Ericssons, the Alcatel-Lucents of the world. Now it's like, obviously Cisco's been around for a while, but it's Cisco's and HPs and these new guys, the Brocades, and all these different new companies that are coming on board now that are new to the space, but are providing a new lift to the industry too.
Absolutely, and I think you're going to see Intel, and from a capability set, with what they're doing with their chipset and the boards that it'll ride, are going to be players in this emerging market, because it's if you look at what Microsoft's done as far as the way they have their data center set up, they build quote unquote proprietary boards, but they're commodity boards. It's all off of commodity stuff. It's the assembly part is done to their specification, but at the volume they provide it, and they procure it, it's commodity. So it's when you look at that and you say, okay, where's Intel going to play in this arena? And that these guys, the major chip guys, are going to have a play in here, whichever one of them. And I'm choosing Intel because I've been talking to them more recently.
Yeah, and they're a big part of this. Yeah, obviously they're a big part of this too. So
and somewhere, there may be other chip manufacturers that will be emerging in the same way, that will be producing these boards. They're going to influence the market a great deal, because, as you said, these boards will be out there, and the two guys who are working on their PhD are going to grab one and create new services, and they're going to roll it out. That's the excitement of the industry, and it's the opportunity that we're seeing right now. And that's where I was talking about the Internet of Things, or the Internet of Everything. It's that level of innovation that's going to drive the network. It's not, I think we're headed into a new era, kicking and screaming, because I think the IoT stuff's going to drag us forward. The needs of that is going to create the demand, and it's going to create the monetization that's going to force the evolution, versus us evolving and then creating the services to need the evolution, I think we're going to be pushed this time.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good point of how it's probably going to work. But yeah, the IoT stuff is definitely going to be an interesting way. It's just interesting evolution of the market for sure. But well, before we wrap this up here, I guess maybe give maybe some tips you might have for telecom operators when it looks to kind of making this move towards NFV. I mean, obviously you mentioned already that hey, it's not too late, but you obviously need to start getting on board with this pretty soon. Beyond that, what are maybe some tips you might have for those guys out there who perhaps are still on the fence or haven't quite ramped up their efforts yet? What do you say to those guys to kind of make sure that they're part of this?
Well, as you mentioned, I would say get started.
Yeah.
Start bringing your staff along this journey, and recognize this is not a sprint. This is going to be a marathon. It's going to be a cultural change. It's going to take a while. There will be casualties. And knowing that sometimes it changes the way you think, but that's the reality. You just have to accept the fact you're not going to be able to bring your entire organization with you. They may or may not be able to make the transition. So you start out with that mindset, as you said, get started as quickly as you can. I would encourage them to be involved with some form of forum, community, where they can exchange experience, because everyone's learning, and it's part of what we do is we provide that platform for people to come share information. There's others, I'm not going to say we're definitely not the one and only, but get involved and learn from what others are doing, and then be willing to share what you're learning. And that's what I would encourage, because the whole industry is going through a major transformation. There's folks that have had a head start. That means they've probably failed a couple times faster than you have. And they can share how not to do what they did, as well as, here's what we did that did work. And, it's the ability to share that kind of experience, both from a case study and use case scenarios that we think is incredibly valuable to the industry.
Yeah. Obviously, the collaboration part of it is big, and like you said, there are lots of organizations out there. Obviously, TM Forum is one of them. But yeah, that does seem like the collaboration part is going to be key, because again, everybody's going to have to kind of learn as they go, and it's obviously much easier in the long term to do this if you're working with other partners and kind of sharing, as opposed to trying to be proprietary. And that's kind of against what this whole virtualization move is really about. It's about being a little more open to everything too. So
the whole thing is setting up a digital ecosystem, and an ecosystem implies multiple partners, and so you're going to have to learn to partner. And that's probably, if not the biggest, but one of the biggest challenges that telecoms are going to have to face, because culturally they're not used to partnering. They're used to being the big fish.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's a big change for those guys, definitely going forward. So, well, hey, Ken, we definitely appreciate the great insight on this today. Obviously, this is an evolving market that I'm sure will, touch base with you guys again going forward as well. But definitely appreciate the great insight on this and helping us kind of manage the hype cycle that is enveloping the NFV space. So we definitely appreciate the time and insight today. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Great. We'll talk again soon. Thanks again. All right. Well, that'll do it for this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. Thanks again for joining us. And please check us out again next week for a new episode.
NFV SDN Reality Check with Dan Meyer is a production of RCR TV. To suggest show topics or to reach Dan, you can find him on email, dmeyer@rcrwireless.com, and on Twitter @Meyer_Dan. For more Dan, news on NFV SDN and everything wireless, find your way over to rcrwireless.com.